was in Westminster, in London. This was after we had introduced the character, and I was sitting in a sandwich bar. All of a sudden, up the stairs came John Constantine. He was wearing the trench coat, a short cut. He didn't even look exactly like Sting. He looked exactly like John Constantine. He looked at me, stared me straight in the eyes, smiled, nodded almost conspiratorially, and then just walked off around the corner to the other part of the snack bar. I sat there and thought, should I go around that corner and see if he really is there? Or should I just eat my sandwich and leave? I opted for the latter. I thought it was the safest. I'm not making any claims to anything. I'm just saying that it happened. Strange little story. This quote is from a 1993 Wizard magazine interview with Alan Moore, the creator of the Hellblazer comics and the character of John Constantine. This is also not the only real-world encounter that Moore claims to have had with his fictional creation. Years later, in another place, he steps out of the dark and speaks to me. He whispers, "I'll tell you the ultimate secret of magic. Any see you next Tuesday could do it." Alan Moore is also not the only person to report meeting the fictional wizard. Original Hellblazer writer Jamie Delano also claims to have encountered Constantine during his run on the character outside the British Museum. Peter Milligan saw Constantine at a party around 2009 and rushed after him, only to find he had disappeared. Brian Azzarello once saw him in a Chicago bar, but avoided him, saying, "The thing about John is, the last thing you would want is to be his friend." To most, this is an extremely far-fetched and impossible idea. But ask a Tibetan Buddhist, and they may have a different interpretation. In Tibetan Buddhism, a Tulpa is a materialized being or thought form, which is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. The concept comes from the third aspect of Trikaya. And Trikaya is the fundamental Mahayana Buddhist doctrine. It outlines the extra-dimensional nature of Buddhahood. To remember, there are multiple different schools of thought in Buddhism. And in this particular one, Buddha isn't only one figure. You can become a Buddha, Bodhisattva. It's all sorts of different beliefs, and Buddhism actually, some of it can be quite different from what most Westerners assume that it is. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Practitioners, sometimes called Tulpamancers, believe that these creations are sentient and independent beings. And interestingly, we see a similar concept evolve independently in Japan. You have to remember, Japan was closed off from the rest of the world for a very long time. So we know this is something they came up with on their own, and that is thoughtography. Thoughtography, not thotography. And this was the belief that people could burn images from their own imagination or their own mind onto photography film. Sometimes other surfaces as well, like wood and canvas. While these were claimed psychic abilities, the purported practitioners of thoughtography were adamant. They were adamant that it was not a paranormal phenomenon, but a physical phenomenon. The strength of their will, or what have you, was so strong they could project it physically. And The Ring, the horror film The Ring, originally Ringu in Japanese, is influenced by this concept of thoughtography. The concept of tulpas was unknown to the English-speaking world until the 20th century, when European explorers to Tibet translated the teachings into English. I'm not sure if these were written down, if this was oral traditions that were being translated here. I couldn't find clarity on that. But the teachings on tulpas and other aspects of Tibetan mysticism were influential in theosophy. The practitioners of which are called theosophists. And theosophy was the mystical system and the esoteric teachings of Helena Blavatsky, as a woman largely credited with bringing occult philosophy to the West. Helena Blavatsky was a major influence in Western esoteric tradition. I did a video a couple years ago going over occultism and magic in the West, and I mentioned Helena Blavatsky in that video as well. Similar parallels would be homunculi. It's the plural of homunculus. You may have heard this term before. 16th century European alchemists believed that they could create homunculi, which were artificial humanoids, using their alchemical processes. They believed that they were miniature artificial humanoids. They looked like man, but they were smaller, and for some reason they believed that they were naturally gifted artists and sculptors. But this wasn't always in Europe that this idea was around. In the Muslim world, Islamic alchemists had this concept of takwin. I'm not sure, I'm not great with Arabic pronunciation, but these Islamic alchemists believed that they could use alchemy to create all forms of life and matter. Obviously, the famous thing that we commonly think of alchemy with, they believed that they could turn different minerals into gold. They could create gold, diamonds, silver, things like that. But these Islamic alchemists also believed that they could create prophets. They could create holy prophets using alchemy, so divine human teachers. They believed you'd be created. And we see writings on this from the Muslim world going back to the year 900 or so. So this stuff is, in Europe we see it in the 16th century. We don't know when it originated in Tibet, but we didn't translate it till the 20th century. But all the way back in the year 900, we see it in the Muslim world. This was also paralleled with the concept of golems. Golems come from Judaism, the Jewish tradition, and they believed that golems were these physical living beings that could be formed out of mud and clay, and then if you surrounded them with Hebrew letters, you spoke Hebrew, certain words to them, they would be animated and they would do your bidding. We even see mention of this in the Bible. So here, Bible, Psalm 139. So right here, Psalm 139, and then 16. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. That first line, your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In the original Hebrew, the word unformed substance would be golem or golmi. Your eyes beheld my golem. So, we see this concept, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, in Japan, so it's all over the place here. Homunculi are referenced in the teachings. Not only, so we have Tulpas appear in the teachings of Helena Blavatsky and her system of theosophy. But then another very influential force in the world of Western esotericism, the Fraternity of the Rose Cross, or the Rosicrucians. They make reference to homunculi in their writings. Alan Moore is certainly not shy about sharing his spiritual views. He openly calls himself a practicing magician. You can look at his contemporaries from the late 80s, early 90s, and that British comic book scene as well. Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, they're both heavily involved with the occult. You think of The Invisibles, written by Grant Morrison. That book is called Magic in the form of a comic book. Supposedly, Morrison claims that the creation of The Invisibles almost killed him. I believe Grant Morrison is very openly a practitioner of chaos magic. He says that he is, but famous ghost hunter Lorraine Warren. We don't know Lorraine Warren from the Conjuring films, and Lorraine Warren, she said that she believes that Bigfoot is a tulpa, a physical manifestation of the collective belief of all those who studied the Patterson-Gimlin films a little bit too closely. Maybe they spent a little bit too much time in Oregon. They got one of those Bigfoot stickers. But I think an interesting question is whether or not it matters. Maybe Bigfoot doesn't exist physically. Maybe the Loch Ness Monster isn't real. Maybe ghosts aren't real and aliens. the list goes on, but if millions and millions of people do believe, and I mean they truly, truly believe that those things are real and that they exist physically out in the world somewhere, even if those people aren't, mystically forming physically based on the willpower of those believers, does that mean that they don't exist in some theoretical sense? Think of the impact Bigfoot has had on our culture, our society, the impact of aliens, of ghosts. These things, even if they don't exist, have had tangible impacts on the world around us, on culture, on art, on society. So in that way, isn't it true that they do exist? Did Alan Moore create John Constantine in our physical world through magical means, either intentionally or accidentally? Probably not. But was the strength of his fictional creation so strong that upon seeing somebody who resembled the character, not only he himself, but three other men, you can call Alan Moore crazy. You can say, oh, he's doing all this witchcraft, blasphemy, but the three other guys, all of them allowed themselves to believe that something they knew logically and intrinsically was impossible actually happened. They allowed themselves to completely throw logic to the wayside and say, I met a fictional character for real, and they truly believe that that thing happened. Anyways, guys, this is just a very interesting topic. That's just something that interests me. I hope to be able to do more topics like this going forward, because these sorts of things, I do spend a lot of time researching this kind of stuff. I just find it very interesting, even if I don't believe in it, I find it fascinating. But anyways, I hope you liked it. I know it's not my usual sort of thing. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this almost every single day. Till next time, guys.